Michaela Vernava for NESN.com here on Radio Row, and I'm joined now by Mike Pereira, rules analyst for Fox Sports and former VP of officiating for the NFL. Mike, thanks so much for joining us today.
You know my favorite word in my introduction is former. I'm so glad I'm the former NFL Vice President of Officiating, because I wouldn't have wanted to been that person this year. They had a lot of issues that went on in officiating, so I'm glad to be the former.
Okay, I want to get to those issues because it did seem like there was a rise in mistakes in calls. But I'm curious, is that just the perception that we have because of the way we consume the game nowadays, or is there actually an increase in mistakes?
Well, I don't think we'll ever know that. I mean, I would know it if I was still the VP, because you do chart all that information. So, whether or not there's an increase in the number of mistakes, I really don't know. But what I do know is the types of mistakes that were being made shouldn't be made on this level in the NFL. And then it becomes, and this was a stretch of over 6 or 7 weeks. You had these inadvertent whistles, or stopping the clock or winding the clock when it should have stopped. Those type losing a down. I mean, those should never happen. And so you really, to me, I had to look and say, why are these types of mistakes?
Why are they happening?
And I'll tell you, to me, the officiating department right now and the staff of officials is much like a team. They're in a rebuilding phase. I mean, you have 22 new officials in just 2 years, and that's a fifth of your staff when you're normally looking at, an average time in the league of 15 years as an official. So I do think that they're going through a rebuilding process. Because I'll tell you, the game is so different than college football. I don't care if it's the SEC or the Pac-12. This game is so much faster and so much more complex that it takes time. You're not eligible to work a Super Bowl until you've had 5 full seasons in the league. Why? Because most good officials will tell you it takes that long to get used to the speed of the game. So all of a sudden now you have a fifth of your staff that has so little of experience. It not only, you have these new officials, but you have the veterans that are trying to cover for them and work with them. So I think they're going through a rebuilding process. I think they'll continue to do that because they have a very big group that is in that range, that is in the retirement area. And I think that, so they'll have to rebuild a little bit more. But the good news is when you rebuild, you get better.
The rebuilding, that explains a lot, but honestly, I don't think it's really going to pacify the fans at home who love their football. And especially when a game is changed because of a bad call, a missed call, they're not happy about it. So how can they then hasten this rebuilding process? Is there anything they can do? I know that officials aren't full-time employees.
Right.
Is there some sort of program during the off-season so that these mistakes don't happen again in the number that they did next season?
Well, there's only one way to get better, and that's by getting more reps. You ask any player, how do they improve? They get more reps. In officiating, you don't get a lot of reps. It's a once-a-week game, and it's not like that you're still working college football and the NFL, so it does take a little bit of time. But I think maybe the problem's a little deeper than that now. I think the expectations of officials are greater than it used to be. We always said in the league, you wanted to strive for perfection in officiating, but you knew you never were going to get there. It's impossible.
Right, there'll always be that human element.
There's 22 players, they're fast. You got 7 officials. Perfection's not really attainable, but you always want to try for that. But the problem is now, I think, with social media and with people like me that are out there talking about officiating all the time, the expectation now is that they should be perfect. And one mistake is now deemed to be a disaster. And replay has created a scenario that's put more emphasis on officials. And while it's not going to change, I think that we are all going to have to realize that there are other people that make mistakes than just officials. There are players that make mistakes, there are coaches that make mistakes, and there are officials that make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, and we're going to have to live with that.
Certainly, but like you said, the only way players get better is with more reps, and the difficulty is that there are only so many games. But can the referees, can you simulate reps, like practices, so that they maybe get better at this rather than just the season?
You could do some things. Like, I've never been an advocate of full-time officiating, but I'm closer now than I've ever been. Because I actually do think that the 17 referees, I think they should be full-time, and I mean full-time, not sitting on their butts at home watching video, but at an officiating institute, evaluating everything together, and determining what needs to be called and what doesn't need to be called so they could take consistent messages back to their crews. I think that's necessary now, and I know the league has looked into that, but just like players, officials have a union, and if the union doesn't want an official to be taken out of his everyday job and put into a situation where he's an at-will employee, so if there's no guarantees, they're against doing that. I personally think that you can work that out if you really want to. It's just about money, and that's something that, to me, the league has plenty of. And I think if they really wanted to take a serious step to making things better, I think you take these 17 most important guys you have and you make them full-time. Now, yes, could you get more reps? Maybe you could go to training camp and spend more time in training camp, but those aren't real speed reps, and even preseason. Preseason's not. I remember my first time I stepped on the field in the NFL game, I was panicked. I said, can I do this? I thought, I came out of the whack. I thought, here I go to the NFL. And my first preseason game was in Green Bay, and when the game was over, I thought, oh my God, I could do this, and because it wasn't that difficult. And then the guy working on my sideline said, hey, Rook, this was a scrimmage. That's all this was. Wait till the regular season starts, and it's true. So I do think things will get better, and there are some training programs for the officials now before they even get in, a developmental program, and if they could bring back NFL Europe, by the way, which was a bonanza for us as a training ground for officials, something like a spring league like that would help, but it's not here now. So.
All right, Mike Pereira, thanks so much for your insight. Appreciate it.
You got it. My pleasure.